Hi there. This is, I've been intending to do this video for well over a year now. I've kind of collected, well, not kind of, I have collected a bunch of Q&As about, I think mostly geared around, like, the pregnancy, but there might be some other stuff on here, too. Alrighty. So the first one is, what is your age and what pronouns do you use? I'm 31. I just turned 31 about a month ago on November 14th. And I use he, him, his pronouns. The next question is, are there terms you prefer when discussing aspects of your pregnancy, your body, etc.? I think I use a lot of typical language for those body parts, like cervix, uterus, egg, fallopian tubes. I do say vagina. I know that people have a lot of different words for that one, but I think that that's the one I usually end up using the most often. I guess I say chest feed, and I would say chest milk as well. That would be one, I guess, less common way to refer to it. Though, it's more inclusive, so it would be nice to see it kind of transition over to being the dominant term for that, because why not, right? Let's see. What myths or misconceptions about transmasculine folks and pregnancy would you most like to clear up? Well, I think the first thing that I would say is that if we do choose to take hormones, we are told from day one that it'll make us unfertile. And honestly, that's just like a blatant lie. It's not backed up by any science or fact. There's no empirical merit to that whatsoever. Also, as far as the effects of HRT on fertility go, even though all the data I found happens to be anecdotal, and of course, you know, data is essentially the plural of anecdote, it's overwhelmingly positive. So I feel like it's a substantial collection of people at this point who identify as genderqueer or transmasculine and have been on HRT for anywhere from 1 to 10 years. Most of those folks are able to get pregnant when they want to, it would seem. And I also think it's really important that we take into consideration, you know, like, the lens that this is coming from when medical professionals tell us that we can't have families, because honestly, that's been the narrative. This is heteronormative narrative for the longest, is that families aren't for queer people. And the queer society sees you, you know, the less likely. As it is right now, even most homosexual couples struggle in a majority of states to adopt children. So it's really, really difficult for people to give the same merit that they do to traditional families, to families where one or both of the parents are transgender. But families are for everyone. Families are absolutely for queer people. Families are absolutely for genderqueer people and for transgender people. And if you want a family, you should try to have one, because chances are that you can. I bet you when all is said and done and there are actual legitimate studies done, we'll find that trans people probably have a very comparable level of infertility to cis people. Alrighty, but what else would I... Oh, that's right. And as far as, like, other things that I would tell trans people is that regardless, if you do decide to have a baby, regardless of whether you go for a home birth or a hospital birth, obviously I opted for a home birth that turned into a hospital birth at the end. I think it absolutely behooves anyone and everyone who's about to enter down that journey of bringing another life into the world to have a midwife or a doula. You absolutely need the support at the hospital, and it is so important to, like, have an advocate in your corner and someone who can educate you and support you and be there after the baby is born, because the hospital just is going to kind of one and done you and ship you on out. You're going to want the support that comes with a midwife or a doula for the 4 or 6 weeks after you have that baby. It's an invaluable asset. You will never regret that you made that choice. Next question. Someone says, hi, maybe you already answered this and can direct me to another video, but I'm a trans man, and my fiance and I are researching the best options to conceive. I'm wondering about hormones and how that works while pregnant. One has to completely stop them, right? Does facial hair still grow? Do periods still come? Thank you for any help. Awesome. So I'm going to tackle this in chunks. So the first thing that they say here is that and I'll just use gender-neutral pronouns because this person, while they identify that they're a trans man, doesn't confirm that they use he, him, his pronouns, or they, them, so I'll just defer to neutral pronouns for the sake of being respectful here. So the first question they ask is that they're wondering about hormones and how that works while pregnant. So the thing about testosterone is that it does not stop ovulation. So you can totally ovulate and conceive while you're on testosterone. The thing is that testosterone disrupts the process that allows you to grow a lining in your uterus. And I'm just going to use the words that I use. So I'm going to apologize in advance if anybody uses different words for these organs or is offended by them. That's definitely not my intention. So you just don't grow the lining in your uterus. So it doesn't matter if you've got a fertilized egg in there or not. It doesn't have anywhere to go. So it's just going to, you're just going to pass it on out. Even if you're not having periods, you still make mucus and cervical mucus, and it just kind of gets reabsorbed into your body that way. And it also upsets the balance that, that you need to get pregnant. The thing that is super cool about the system in there is that it's able to kind of make its own, like, micro, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess, like, microenvironments of hormones, like local hormones. So if you, like, have a gap in using testosterone, for most people, it seems about 3 months is how long they need to be off of it before that hormonal cycle is coming back, and fertility is back, and pregnancy is possible. For some people it's less, for some people it's longer. But let's say you have a gap in there long enough to, like, have a lining. You could get pregnant and then go back on to testosterone, and testosterone wouldn't necessarily disrupt the cycle that you had. You probably shouldn't do that because we don't know what the effects of taking testosterone is on babies. But it's probably, there probably is some effect, right? And it probably would have effects that, would basically be like taking consent away from a fetus. You know, you could be doing something that you know would change that unborn baby's physiology, and so that starts to go into the realm of modifying someone without their consent, I would say. So I would definitely not advise continuing to stay on testosterone if you know that you're pregnant or are trying to conceive. But it's important to be aware of, because you could have a break in testosterone, get pregnant, go back on the testosterone, not realize it, and your body would be able to mostly sustain the hormonal cocktail it needed to keep that baby developing. The testosterone would keep you from realizing it. It would suppress side effects, like the nausea or like the chest tenderness you might get. So that's always something to be super aware of. Every time, I mean, and it depends obviously of the type of relationships you have, the type of sex that you're having, but if you're engaging in any type of intercourse where you are exposing yourself potentially to someone's ejaculate, I think it's really important to take a birth control test, no matter how careful you're being, 4 weeks, and then again 8 weeks after you're on testosterone, just to absolutely make sure. I think that's best practice. So anyway, that's the effects of testosterone. For those reasons, I wasn't on it. I've been off of it for like 3 months when I started trying. And by the time I got pregnant, which was 6 months after that, I'd been off of it for 9 months. And then by the time I had the baby, it had been about like 1.5 years that I hadn't been on testosterone for, maybe a smidgen longer. So hopefully that covers that topic. Certainly feel free to comment if you have additional questions about it or like follow-up information that you would like to know. So the next part is, one has to completely stop the testosterone. Yes, I would say so. Does facial hair still grow? It does, but it is less thick and full. Like, you can do a comparison. You can see what mine looks like now, and I've been on testosterone again for about 9 months. And you can look at how it looked like right after I had the baby while I was pregnant, and you can see that it's definitely darker, thicker, and coarser now. But it was still growing before. Another fun fact, as long as we're sharing fun facts, I have a pretty hairy body. I grow hair on most of it, but when I was on the estrogen, I shed off all the hair I grow on my back. Probably about 60% of what I grow on my chest and the other places in my body. And the hair on my back, like, completely came off. I don't know if I said that or not, but anyway. And then it slowly grew back in again over, like, the first 6 months I was on testosterone, and it's still, I guess, filling in now. So, there was definitely changes. I definitely noticed changes, but I definitely still retained way more body hair than before I ever went on testosterone, that's for sure. And obviously I still had what most people would call a full beard the whole time that I was pregnant and off of the estrogen, even though it is notably fuller now, and it definitely has grown back in other places on my body where it was not maintained while I was on estrogen. Alrighty, do periods still come? If you're not on testosterone, yeah, absolutely. For sure. I think that's the context in which you would be asking about it. And I know some people still have some cycling on testosterone, though I think that that's pretty rare. For me, when I start taking testosterone within 3 months, they completely go away. And my fertility, at least for me, is gone. Like, I have all manner of unprotected sex when I'm not on testosterone, and I don't get pregnant because I'm not having periods. I may be ovulating, and those eggs may be getting fertilized, but they're, like I said, there's no lining there, there's nothing to nourish those eggs, I just pass them. So it's pretty much like being on birth control. And then when I go off of it, it takes 3 months for those cycles to resume. And that 3 month bracket there is pretty common. And again, some people it's less, and for some people it's more. And some people, you know, especially people who have polycystic ovary syndrome, for them it might be more difficult in the first place. And I don't know how testosterone use might exacerbate people who have PCOS, because those, you know, ovaries in that situation are just sort of genetically inclined to get cysts and to develop infertility and other problems like that. So that is different, obviously. I think that was everything for that question. Moving on, how does it feel having a baby? And this person, I ended up asking for further clarification, and his question was specifically, how does it feel to have, like, a baby developing inside of your body? Like, how much do you feel it? And for me, both of the times I was pregnant, I didn't really notice, didn't notice the feeling. I mean, obviously I noticed, like, the nausea and the morning sickness and things like that, but as for physically feeling the fetus, I don't even really start to notice it till I'm about 5 months pregnant. And I don't even start to have, like, a noticeable bump until I am about 5 months along either. And I would say then it starts off as just a gentle tickle, and then it gets fuller and fuller feeling to the point of being uncomfortable. And I would say the uncomfortableness sets in for probably about, like, the last 2 months, and it just gets more intense from there. The last 2 to 4 weeks are just so uncomfortable, because there's not enough room for everything, and your stomach is scrunched up, and you take all these shallow breaths because your lungs can't expand as much as you would like them to. Your intestines are all smashed up. It's just awful. It's so uncomfortable. And your hips hurt all of the time. There's just no way you can really sit where there isn't, like, an ungodly amount of pressure on something. There's no position that's comfortable. It's rough, for sure. It's really uncomfortable to bring another human being into the world. Alrighty. Someone else asks here if I had top surgery prior to the pregnancy, and what kind of regrowth can happen. So there's a lot of information to share there, and some of this will be repeated from other videos, so feel free to, like, skip through to the next question if you want to, if you've heard this information before. So as far as, like, what surgeries I've had, it's essentially, yeah, I have had a top surgery. It wasn't a full mastectomy and double mastectomy, and by that I mean that not all of the chest tissue was removed. If you want to hear a more in-depth story about that, I do have a separate video about it, but for the purposes of this, that's the only background information that I'll share about that, because it's really the only information that's, like, relevant to answering the rest of the question, which is about regrowth. So for me, I'll share my own information too, and then I'll elaborate on that outside my own circumstances with some other folks' information that I'm aware of as well. So for my situation, obviously, I still had some mammary tissue left in there. However, I had my nipples completely removed and placed back again. So all those channels were severed, and, you know, it was expected that there was going to be a lot of scar tissue at those reconnection points. And due to that scar tissue, pretty much every medical professional that I spoke to me that I spoke to told me that that would make lactation impossible. And that seems to make good sense, right? That's what you would think. I did notice some swelling and increased size, not much, and probably no one but me noticed it, but it was slight, it was there, and that developed pretty quickly once I'd gotten pregnant. There was tenderness there and a little bit of development. It was very surprising for me and for my medical team when I did end up lactating out of both sides once the baby was born, and I have a whole video too about whether or not, about the lactation. I think I called Did I Lactate When the Baby Was Born or whatever. So if you want to know more about that, you can go reference that information. But yeah, I did on both sides, and there was a little bit of development. And it pretty much all went back to exactly the way it was, like size-wise, afterwards. So if there was any extra development of tissue there, it was very minimal, and it's not noticeable now. It's the same as it was. So that's what happens to me personally. And then I've read stories about other guys. I'll just say guys, because in these stories they were specifically using, identifying as like in a binary masculine way and using he, him, his pronouns. But there could very well be non-binary people who've had this experience as well. But these guys had had a complete mastectomy, so they had had all of their mammary tissue completely scraped off down to the muscle, and then had, the nipples removed and placed back on as well. And they also, lactated. So in their case, it was even more extreme. The body had to regenerate that mammary tissue and regrow those channels that allow nipples to secrete milk or whatnot. So pretty fascinating stuff. But yeah, regardless of what degree of top surgery you've had, it is very likely that if you conceive and get pregnant that you will lactate at least to some degree out of one or both sides. And that's really good information to be aware of, because I certainly didn't know that. And I was not prepared for that emotionally, and I'll be honest with you, it did fuck with my head a little bit when the baby was born. And then I had to deal, like right in that moment, with like this ethical